Welcome to Life Unrestricted.
This is your show if you're sick of living a life controlled by food and exercise rules, and if you're ready to learn how to accept yourself and enjoy the heck out of life. My gig is about body image, femininity, self-worth, and resilience. Come on, let's walk side by side as we slowly step out of restriction misery and unlock our true selves.
Your host, Merritt Boxler, is a former national radio DJ, freelance journalist, speaker, and writer with a passion to make women feel good in their bodies. This is a show brought to you live from Switzerland.
Hey there, lovely radical. Great to have you back for another love ride with the Life Unrestricted podcast. Expect it to be smooth and expect your mood to be lifted. You know what? I got a lot of comments on my Cool Kids Club remark on my podcast with Maria Paredes. And I'm really happy I blurbed it out like that because look, I was never a cool kid. You know them cool kids back when we were in school? In fact, I was probably the uncoolest kid in the Northern Hemisphere. At least that's what I felt like. When I stood there alone in the corner on the school playground trying to be invisible so that I wouldn't get hassled or bullied too much. And now seeing what I did for years, namely mold myself into a version that was going to be spared that experience again, or a version that was going to be loved and included. Now I see that in all these years of obsessing and counting and monitoring myself and really losing my sense of self, I was kind of abandoning myself, trying to be someone or something else because I didn't love myself. I didn't even know the concept of loving oneself at all. Maybe you know what I'm talking about, but either way, this is not a state to live in. We know now. So that's why we're here. And what made me think of that comment of us being the new cool kids was that I really feel a lot better when I can talk to you openly, without a mask, no facade, about all the struggles and the fears and the joy and everything. When I feel like I can really be myself and thereby give others a sense of being safe around me, and of not being judged, I think that's sort of cool. And I mean cool in the coolest way, which is, of course, warm, right? Let's put it that way. The old cool sounded like, oh, look at her over there. I'd never play with her. She's pathetic. Look at her. She doesn't belong to us for sure. And now the new cool kids sound like, hey, look, there's someone over there standing by themselves and looking uncomfortable. Let's go over there and see if we can make her feel better. Maybe she'd like to play with us. What do you think? Get it? That's the new cool kids. That's us. So you, my friend, you certainly belong to the Cool Kids Club now, when you're also moving towards acceptance of yourself and acceptance of others, towards inclusion, mutual support and all that. That's a cool kid, if there ever was one. So here we are, totally cool kids, cheering for each other, seeing the worth in each other, having that sense of community and belonging. That's essential on this journey because that thing called self-love or self-acceptance, that isn't just a flip we can switch. It's something that makes us connect as we start to not always trust our inner gremlin voice, but letting other people who we trust tell us that we belong, that we're good enough right now. Just by being you, just by being me. And look, of course, I don't buy my own words a lot of the time myself. So I need all of you just as much as you might need me, because this is a collective work, this body positive journey. And we all sort of need each other. That's also the beauty of it. You don't even need to support this podcast on Patreon, on my support site, on this creator sort of donation page, patreon.com. You don't even need to do that to be a cool kid. You're one anyway. If you do it, I love you muchly for it because I'm very glad for people supporting the podcast because I'm not earning anything from this work. So if you want to support it, please go to patreon.com/lifeunrestricted. And Patreon spells patreon.com/life-unrestricted. Thank you. And now, today's episode of the Life Unrestricted podcast brings you the lovely Erin Flores from Calabasas, California. Erin is a registered dietitian nutritionist who specializes in intuitive eating and health at every size. As he describes on his website, he promotes a non-diet, weight-neutral approach to changing behaviors that lead to improved health. He says, if you feel like you've tried every diet, your weight has yo-yoed for years, and you are ready to stop fighting your body and learn to love food again, then I am the dietitian for you. Good, right? I've had Erin in my ears for a while now because he's the man that hosts one of my favorite podcasts, namely Dietitians Unplugged, with the fabulous Glennis Oyston, whom I introduced you to in the episode number 12 of the Life Unrestricted podcast. I highly recommend you go listen to her. She's a wonderful woman. So it's high time for you to meet the other half of that wonderful podcast, Dietitians Unplugged. And that's Erin. When I called him and told him how honored I was to talk to one of the precious few men who are brave enough to talk about body image issues and body acceptance, he broke the ice with a great opener.
I'm super excited to be on this podcast. One, to talk to you, but of all the podcasts that I've listened to that are similar to ours, Dietitians Unplugged, you have by far the best intro. I love the dude who comes on and is like, in a world where you're sick of dieting, listen to Merit. And It's like, it's awesome. It just sets the tone for such a great environment. And so I'm really happy to be here.
It probably strikes a chord with your Darth Vader. Is it Star Wars?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Star Wars. Yeah, you brought it up in the context of dieting once.
So the short story, and this is a great topic to sort of talk about too, is I do a lot of different talks about how Star Wars and using the Force in Star Wars is very similar to being an intuitive eater and moving into the health at every size paradigm. And what I mean by that is the Force teaches Jedi how to be calm and at peace and understand their surroundings. And that is really sort of how I also see health at every size and intuitive eating as being attuned to our bodies, being attuned to how we eat. So if using the Force is being into intuitive eating and health at every size, well, then the opposite of that must be the dark side, and that's diet culture, and that's what hating our body is teaching us. Yeah. So it's been a really fun narrative for me to explore, both in presentations but also with clients, because I think it is an abstract way of making some of these really difficult topics really, really tangible.
Yeah, and that's something that probably a woman would never have come up with. And when I heard it for the first time, and you once posted a meme on Facebook or somewhere, and I was like, this is just the perfect, refreshing male perspective that everyone can relate to, because it's sort of like, it's motivating to jump on the intuitive eating train. It's like, yeah, I want to be part of this.
Right. And that it's funny because that's originally I had that same thought. I was like, this could be a really interesting way to talk to men. And what I find as I present this more and more, because I've done it about 3 or 4 times, is the comments that I get after are more from women. And they come up and say, oh my God, I love Star Wars. This is amazing. I've never thought about this. This is incredible. I'm doing this. And so it's really interesting, like something that in my siloed creative space, I thought, oh, this could really speak to men. Actually, more women seem to really hear it. Now, maybe that's also who I'm presenting to. Maybe there's more women in the audience, so it's not a very scientific study at all. But that's my anecdotal references.
Yeah, we'll talk about men and women later on in the show, but you will not get away without telling your story. And I really want my audience to get to know you, so you better start right at the beginning. How did you relate to body and food when you grew up?
I grew up in Los Angeles. And what's interesting, and I think this is common with many cultures, but my family's Jewish, and it seemed that how I remember food is that I really have these very vivid memories of family events, very positive family events, different life cycle events, whatever, but they all focused around food. Mm-hmm. And I even remember when I was very young, my family, including like my grandparents and my aunt and uncle and whoever else was living in LA at the time, would come together for weekly dinners during the middle of the week. And of course, the social part of it was really important, but also the food part was just as important about, what are we going to have? And, not obsessing, but, being very preoccupied with, what are we going to eat? So, food has always sort of been a part of my family, been a part of my surroundings. And when I was 15, my mom took me to see a dietitian for the first time.
Why?
Well, I think there was a concern about my weight at that point. I remember in high school being aware of how my body looked different than other bodies in my social circle. Mm-hmm. I played volleyball, and I knew as I was playing this sport with my friends that my body looked a little bit different. Now, as a 15-year-old brain, I probably thought I was bigger than them, and I wasn't really that much bigger when I look back at pictures, but I didn't have the musculature that they had. And I didn't have a six-pack, and I didn't have really defined arm muscles or chest muscles. And I think it was almost mutual why I went to the dietitian. Part of me was, okay, I want to look like everyone else. But I think my mother had also identified some other issues with my eating and maybe concerns about my weight. But she had also been to the exact same dietitian. So, there was this family history of dieting that probably led me down that path as well. So I went to see this dietitian, and she's passed away now, but she's very infamous in Los Angeles. And she really taught me some very restrictive eating habits. She taught me how to core out the inside of the bread if I were to order a bagel.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
The best part?
Right, the best part. But that was too much starch. So tunnel out some of the bread before you put the peanut butter in there. But you can't just put the peanut butter in there. You need to open up the peanut butter jar as soon as it comes home and put some paper towels in it. And that absorbs all the oil, so that you're really getting rid of all the oil. You're just getting this sort of really dense, mashed up peanuts. And so this is just what this woman taught. And she was very proud of the fact that she taught this way. I read articles about her after I became a dietitian, and she was very proud of her method. And
she was probably obsessed herself.
I'm sure. But obviously, it wasn't a great experience for me. I lied about everything. I would fill up my food journal in the car before I got to her office. She let me weigh myself in her office, so I would weigh myself, and I would always tell her it's, I'd make up a number that was a little bit less than last week. And I went for not a very long period of time. It was pretty short, but that really sowed the sort of how-to of dieting. I didn't really implement it then, but it really planted a seed for how to do it. And that seed just sat for a while until I was in my 20s. I went to college in Colorado, and I was the worst student in the entire world. I really never went to class. I was unmotivated. I had no idea what I wanted to do. And so instead of living the sort of typical college life, I really stayed at home and played video games and watched old Magnum PI reruns and ate. And my weight definitely increased. And because I was so sedentary, I wasn't doing anything. I had a great group of friends, and we did tons of stuff socially, but it wasn't all the time. And it wasn't, there definitely were emotional needs probably not being met. But I started to eat a lot, and like a lot of college students tend to do. I gained some weight in my 20s. I had dropped out of college. I had come home to LA, and I was in the video game business. I was helping design and create educational video games. And I had woke up one morning and I said, I'm really not happy with my body.
What prompted this?
I don't know. What I've realized about myself at 44 is that I'm the type of guy who I sort of mull things over in my head for a long time, and then all of a sudden I wake up and I'm like, all right, I'm doing this today. Mm-hmm. And so I had been mulling over my own negative body image for quite some time. And then I finally woke up one morning and I said, okay, I'm going to lose weight. And I remembered everything that this woman taught me, this dietitian taught me, and I started to implement it.
How old
as simple
were you
as that.
then?
I must have been somewhere in my late 20s, probably like 26, 27. And I became a really good dieter. I didn't have dessert for a year. And in the middle of this, I thought I was so amazing. Mm-hmm. I thought I was so powerful.
Yeah.
And the reinforcement I got from others was also really
intoxicating. Yeah.
And intoxicating is a good word. When you're in a larger body, like I was in my 20s, you're invisible, or you want to be invisible.
Exactly.
And when I started to lose weight, I became visible, not only to, friends and family, but also to partners I was looking to meet and to engage with. Mm-hmm. So there was this intoxication, I think is a really good word, that fueled this habit. And I really, really was strict, hardcore. I don't know other words, but I was in it. Merciless, yes. And for really probably about a year and a half or 2 years. And I lost weight. But I was also incredibly miserable. I really did want dessert. I really did want a piece of bread. I really did want to enjoy food, but I didn't know how to find any middle ground.
So you had binges as well?
I didn't binge during that time. I really didn't. I was so in it that I was restricting a lot, and I was so intoxicated, if we use that word still, that binging didn't even fit in my mindset.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't have any binges for a long time because I didn't have dessert and bread and stuff for years. And I was merciless. There were no exceptions at all. Right. Because once there were, after a few years, I couldn't stop myself at all. And that scared the living bejesus out of me. So,
yeah, no, it was really scary. Mm-hmm. Just like you said, it was really scary to sort of give that up. And I don't know how it happened, but I did. I ended up giving up and having dessert and having, bread and things like that. And lo and behold, the weight came back. It didn't come back in the same level, but it definitely started to creep back. So what's interesting is, in between this whole period is my career was completely unfulfilling. I really hated my job. I hated working in the video game industry. I had great friends there. It was on paper, it should have been super interesting, but it wasn't. I really got emotionally nothing out of the job. And I realized I can't do this anymore. And I went to a career counselor. I read some books on changing careers, on what should I do. And I thought, well, I have done so well dieting, I should become a dietitian. Just like I'm sure many other dietitians have said, I'm so good at this, maybe I can teach other people. And so I realized that I wanted to quit work, and I did. I quit work and on a Friday and went to summer school on a Monday and started to get all the requirements I needed to become a registered dietitian. But amidst all this weird food issues that I had. Looking back, I know I had food issues, but in the moment I had no clue that I had food issues. I just thought that was a good dieter.
Yeah.
Really, that's what I thought. I really just thought I was good at dieting.
That's what I thought too. And then when I heard you say that, it was really hard for you to admit that, even to yourself, that you had an eating disorder. I thought, yeah, me too. I didn't even realize it. I was just thinking that this is what I have to do in order to look okay.
Yeah, no. Listen, I think that is a profound realization that I've come to literally within the past 6 months. And it took someone else, Andrew Wallen, a brilliant eating disorder specialist out in Baltimore, who, basically said, what makes you think you didn't have an eating disorder? What part of your behavior is gray in that area? Mm-hmm. And to me, that was really important for me to, and it still is important for me to come to terms with that. I had an eating disorder in that period in my life. And to say that out loud is both difficult for me. I mean, even today it's hard, but I think it's so important that we use words like that to out in the open and be truthful with it, because I think that helps change the stigma of it for people that are struggling.
Yeah, totally. And I think many more people than are diagnosed do still have an eating disorder, and they're just not being, it goes undetected for many of them. And then we just think that we are somewhat strict with our workout routines or with our eating, but in fact we become obsessed and addicted to this. So I really appreciate that you, as a man especially, are talking openly about this, because men usually don't do that as quickly, and that makes it really hard for others to open up and, to reduce the whole shame thing, because shame keeps us isolated usually. So I think that the beauty ideal, the thin beauty ideal thing, it hits women harder, but for men, body image and weight issues are becoming more of a struggle too nowadays. Instead of becoming less of a struggle for women, it becomes more of a struggle for men these days. And I guess you just, as guys, you experience it differently, I think.
Yeah, no, I think Glennis and I were talking about this on our podcast, and we basically sort of agreed that the male body image issue is about 10 or 15 years, maybe 20 years behind the curve from what women are dealing with. I think what we're seeing is, especially for men, is there is increased pressure in society for the ideal body. And I think that can, and the hard part is it's not just one ideal body, but I think there's different types of ideal bodies depending on how you identify your gender, how you what is your sexuality, your culture. So I think there's many different ideals for men, but I think there is this ideal that they are feeling pressured that we are feeling pressured to achieve. Mm-hmm. And I think we're just 20 years behind because we don't really have the, spokespeople to say this is bullshit and to say that, this is wrong. Because I think on the, for women, there are a lot of champions. There are a lot of revolutionaries out there who are spreading this message. There's just a lot fewer for men, but I think that will hopefully change soon.
Yeah, I think it's just because you guys are pushed into this sad masculine ideal where guys just have to be strong and fit and please no emotions. And that's not helping anyone. So I think it always needs, a pioneer like you who steps up, or Andrew Wallen who steps up and talks about these issues, because I think it affects men and women, not equally, but still it affects both genders. And what I wanted to ask you before we go back to your nutrition experience and nutrition education is, do you think men experience weight stigma differently also than women?
That's a good question.
To be within.
That's a good question. Mm-hmm. I think on some level we do, and here's why. Recently, and what I mean by recently is maybe in the last few years, I'm really starting to understand the word privilege a lot more, and what male privilege is versus female, and how my experience as a man, just because of my gender, is different, and our society treats men and women differently. And I have, as a male, privilege, especially around my body, but around a lot of other social issues. So I think men experience it a little bit differently, just because as men we have it, I'm going to say, a little bit easier in society. And the reason I say that is because there's this great quote that I found, and it was a guy who wrote on his blog, and he said, if you're playing the game of life, and the game of life is a video game, and you turn on your video game and you're starting to play your video game, and the screen comes up and it asks you, what difficulty setting do you want? Straight white male is the easiest setting there is. And to me, that resonates, because as a straight white male, it makes me realize, I am living life on the easiest difficulty setting there is. Mm-hmm. So once you add weight to that, obviously that changes my privilege a little bit. But because I have straight white male in my default setting, I think it makes it a little bit easier than someone else who is a person of color, who has a different sexual orientation. So the LGBTQ community is going to have that experience differently. So I think for me, I think I experience it differently just because of my privilege.
Yeah, I think so too. And that's why the less privilege you have, and when weight stigma is added and weight discrimination is added on top of that, it only makes everything worse. So consider someone who is maybe black and poor and maybe has a disability or is transgendered or anything, and then gets shamed for not having the ideal body type. I mean, this person has to suffer tremendously with their emotional health and everything. So this is really something that we should stand up for and fight for, to end this weight stigma thing that is only getting worse at this moment in time, I think, still. So that's why I'm speaking up. But let's finish your story. I was going on a tangent here. How did your RD education turn out to be for you?
It was great. I mean, I definitely was, when I was in school, I was so happy that I chose this career. I was much happier. I was still dieting on some level. I still had a lot of food rules, and they were dieting food rules, really. I mean, they were, dressing on the side. If I had salad, it was eating only wheat bread and not white bread. It was, brown rice versus white rice. No
butter.
Right. No butter. It was, no soda for sure. Like diet soda was okay. On and on. So
totally.
I was in school, and I remember going to some presentation. I forget where it was, but I was exposed to intuitive eating for the first time there. And I remember listening to the presentation. I was like, this is really interesting, and I think I should probably look into this. I read the book when I was a student, and I don't think I probably didn't even finish it, but I realized, to me, at that point in my life, it seemed crazy. It really seemed, because it seemed too good to be true. Wait, you're telling me that I could have unconditional permission to eat, and to me that was like a fairy tale almost. Like there's no way that this can work. So it was really me. Like I wasn't ready for that message, because I was still so fearful around food. So I mean, like, my example is I was so fearful that, one of my favorite foods is chicken wings, right? So in the States, we take chicken wings and we fry them, and then we put like really spicy sauce on it. Mm-hmm. And it's like, you go to watch a football game or you go to watch a sporting event, you have wings and you dip it in ranch, and it's gloriously spicy and, mm-hmm. and delicious. And that was like my favorite food. In my dieting mentality, I realized there's no way I can have chicken wings. Like, there's no way. Like, fine, I just won't even go to watch football or a sporting event at a bar, because there'll be chicken wings there.
Yes.
So
and
let's
you'd
just
be tempted. Oh.
yeah. So let's not be tempted. Let's just watch football at home. And to me, that seemed incredibly rational. So when someone in a book is telling me, no, you can actually have chicken wings and you can give yourself permission to have chicken wings and you won't binge on them.
But that's not what they say, right? They say you might binge in the beginning, but the binges will end. And I'm like,
right.
I'm not sure if they will ever end.
But again, that's what I heard, right?
Oh, right.
You're right. That's not what they were saying. But in my brain, that is how I interpreted their message. So I totally got it wrong, but I interpreted it in my own way to justify not moving forward with it.
Yeah, you wanted a safety net. I want a safety net as well.
I want a safety net.
Yeah.
So I put away the book and I became, I passed all my exams. I became a dietitian. I was working at the VA and I was doing, inpatient work. So I was working in the clinical setting and then moved over into the outpatient world. And I actually moved into a weight management program. And when I started that weight management program, I picked up intuitive eating again and I read it. And this time I was ready and I heard the message the way it should be heard. And it really changed everything, both personally and professionally. So I realized working in a weight management program that this was totally counter what this program is teaching these clients. And professionally, it put me in a little bit of not a little bit, it put me in a lot of angst. How can I do this to people? How can I put them on a scale and weigh them? And they're so shamed. And, I know they're struggling and I know why they're struggling. And I want to give them this other path. But
what made you come around from having all this resistance and thinking this is too good to be true and no way, health at every size and this is bullshit, to, oh no, I can't do this to people? What made you wake up?
That's a good question. And I don't quite know the answer. And I think it might have just been, I was tired of dieting. I was just tired of all of this pressure. I was tired of being seeing people suffer totally. But I think I was more mature. Like, I think I was just old enough and had enough experiences where I realized there might be something different than this. Like, there might be, and again, just personally, there might be something different than just getting on the scale every morning and having that number dictate the rest of my day, or getting on the scale at night and worrying about how good or bad I was. And I think I was tired. I was done. I was saying mercy, and I was willing to say this other path, this intuitive eating, might be something for me that is really important. And then if it's going to work and it works for other people, why should I torment these other folks with dieting? Why should I teach them how to diet and make them feel bad if they have whole milk versus non-fat milk? Why can't I teach them intuitive eating? Why can't I show them this new path? And I really equate it, again, here's my movie reference, right? But I equate it to The Matrix. And have you seen The Matrix?
Yes.
Okay. So Neo is with Morpheus and he's in the room, and Morpheus is going to offer him the red pill or the blue pill. And the red pill, he says, takes him down the rabbit hole even more and shows him reality. The blue pill, you go to sleep and you go off to Never Neverland and you continue your dream. And I took the red pill. I took the red pill. I saw the truth, and there was no way I could go back.
But that meant that you had to transition yourself, right? So that,
yes.
All right.
So I probably spent a few years too many, to be honest, at the VA, working in this, I'm going to stop saying weight management. It was a weight loss. It was a diet program. Working in this diet program for probably too long. But the way I sort of justified it is I infused a lot of intuitive eating into my sessions. I ran the program at the campus we were at. So I had the freedom, or sort of the subversive freedom, to infuse a lot of this intuitive eating into our groups. So someone would come in and they would say, I don't want to weigh myself today. I thought I did, I had such a bad week. I go, okay, don't weigh yourself. Go into class. you know.
And what if people came up and said, I want to lose weight, I want to lose weight? Did you tell them that it might not be possible? Or did you tell them, yeah, let's try?
I was very subtle about it. So I never sort of said, well, that's not going to happen, because your body has a set point and whatever. I sort of said, well, let's sort of take a look at it right now. And I would always try and say, let's look at your behaviors first before we focus on the weight. Like, what if we just look at some of the things that you're doing in your life that might be making food really uncomfortable for you? So I would sort of use some of these ideas to think about things beyond the scale, but overall it just became too hard to manage, too hard to sort of be true to myself. This was a span of about 3 years, probably 3 or 4 years of running this program and working on my own intuitive eating, but also trying to apply it, subversively within this program. And I finally said, that's enough. And really that's fairly recently. That was last year, August, that I said, I need to leave the VA and I need to, have this private practice and do this intuitive eating and health at every size for reals, and just being out in the open instead of hiding all of it.
Mm-hmm. And it's beautiful. You have this great image on your website that perfectly describes the diet cycle, of which most people only want to see the first part, which is the losing weight part, which sadly works for everybody almost, but sadly only short term. And the second part is the part where the weight comes back and we blame ourselves usually. And your image, your map of the diet cycle shows the entire sad circle. So please describe it to everyone.
So that's actually taken directly from the intuitive eating book, and I reference it on the image there. But that's one of the things that when I saw that image in the book Intuitive Eating, I was like, oh, yeah, I'm in this hamster wheel of dieting. Of course I am. So that cycle it starts with our desire to be thin. It starts with this notion that our body does not fit, that we need to change it, whether it's 5 pounds or 50. We have this idea that I need to be thinner. I need to be smaller. And the way that we know how to do that is to go on a diet. And that means restricting food. That means cutting out things that were, try to minimize the amount of calories coming in, restrict some form of eating, and then all of a sudden, once we do that, without our even control,
over-exercising, yeah.
Right, or over-exercising, sure, absolutely. But as soon as we do that, we have these increased cravings for food because our body's not getting enough, and this loss of control. And what happens is, these cravings sort of come in, and we have no way to deal with them. And our body both sort of does this because our bodies are not really designed to lose weight. And so our body just sees weight loss as stress.
Starvation. Danger, yeah.
And danger. So it does everything it knows to combat that. And so it leads to preoccupation with food. It leads to obsessing about food. It leads to, binging, absolutely. And as soon as we binge, right, as soon as we sort of say, I can't take it anymore, I can't hold on to this anymore, we give in. We give in and we binge and we lose control and we start to we overeat. We eat the things that we were trying to restrict, that were on our do not eat list. Mm. And as soon as that happens, we have this increase of guilt and shame that we failed. And then it leads to this weight gain. And all of a sudden we go back to wanting to be thin. And that's where the hamster wheel is. You're sort of riding this cycle of, am I on a diet or am I off a diet? Am I on a diet or am I off a diet? Which diet am I going to choose this week? That one didn't work last month. Well, geez, let's give this one a try. Maybe I'm just not trying hard enough. Oh, that worked for this period of time. Maybe I'll try that again. And we just live in that cycle over and over and over and over.
And I love how you speak the truth about diets. In big letters, it says on your website, you didn't fail the diet failed you, with exclamation point. And I think it's really just that we and probably most people, I didn't realize that my binging or my loss of control or my obsession with food was my problem, was proof that I was broken, was proof that I was somehow a freak, was proof that I had no willpower, was proof that I had to be more strict. But I never tied it back to, oh, is that a consequence of me dieting? So I really wonder, why is it that the majority of people obviously still clings on to the hope that the next best diet will work for them?
I think it's because that's the only thing they know. Mm-hmm. I mean, honestly, I think it's just that is the predominant.
Again,
that's the prevailing thought is that
what we do.
It's what we do, and for many people, their life is really defined by what diet they're on and their weight, and so it is. It's so interesting because it's that Neo analogy. You're so far into it. You're so in the culture that to have perspective and step outside of that is a really big step. I mean, it's really looking at the world from a new lens. And, most people just don't want to use that lens.
That's so spot on. And it takes a huge step back to see the bird's perspective somehow, and then realizing, oh my God, what was I doing? What was I believing? And really not ever questioning what I was doing. So I think it takes more of us who speak up about how diets don't work and why they don't work, and how we can find the way back to our inner voice that tells us what to do and what not to do, and not the outside fear rules and whatever we have started to listen to, like diet programs and exercise rules and like external rules, sort of.
Yeah.
But I think still the transition, I can only speak for myself, is really hard to do, because if we don't work on body image at the same time, it affects how quote unquote successful we are with implementing intuitive eating. Because I notice myself, whenever the weight creeps further up, I'm like, oh, no way. I can't. The world will leave me. No one will love me. This is going to go out of hand. I'm probably not one of those people who intuitive eating is for, and I knew it didn't work. So how did you do that?
To be honest, the intuitive eating part, I think, and the food part of intuitive eating came much easier than the body part. To be honest, I probably worked more at the beginning on the food part than the body part. I really had to work first on sort of changing my relationship with food, no matter what that meant to my weight. And again, maybe this is because of my straight white male, easy life setting, right? I didn't, body image maybe wasn't quite as important at that moment for me. Like, I wasn't feeling as pressured to fit in.
Or threatened
with my or threatened, right? So I don't know. I'm really just guessing. I think that afforded me the time to focus just on the food and not as much on the body. But what's interesting is because I had restricted for so long, that of course the weight that I was at my lowest was an unnatural weight. It was my weight when I was restricting. It wasn't my weight when I was eating. Listening to hunger and fullness cues and with attunement and all these things. So, of course, my weight naturally shifted and I gained weight. But I think what helped me is I got rid of the scale. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the first things I sort of committed to doing is like, I'm just going to not weigh myself anymore. And I think that helped me with the food part.
And you just went out and bought new jeans and everything? You just didn't give a...
You got to remember, I had been in a larger body before. Mm-hmm. So I mean, honestly, and I probably still have a lot. I have clothes that fit, 5 different sizes of Aaron.
Yeah, me too.
So if I, size 36 jeans, I moved into the 38 because I still had them, or I moved into the 40 because I still had them.
Yeah, and good thing that the retro fashion thing is actually a thing. So the old stuff gets trendy again. It's like, oh, okay, my 90s jeans are actually en vogue again.
Right. Well,
Yeah,
you
I'm
got
just
to
joking.
remember. No. I listen. You got to remember. I'm the straight white male on this, so I'm going to play to the stereotype a little bit. I have like the same color jeans that I had when I was like in probably probably from the 1990s.
Yes.
I don't know if I have boot cut or relaxer. I don't know. I just have a pair of damn jeans. So and a polo shirt. I mean, that's sort of my standard attire to go to work. So. There's not a whole lot of variance that needs to come into that. That doesn't change too much over time.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the length of the collar and if I'm wearing the collar up or down.
Wow.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're going way back with
Big
that.
change. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. To be honest, I've worked on the body image part second and later after intuitive eating. I sort of was able to change my relationship with food. Then I had to change. And I still work on changing my relationship with my body.
Because it started to become, your body image became worse when your weight started increasing? Or did you always feel self-conscious? Because I noticed that no matter how thin I was or how big I was, I always hated my body. And I thought that maybe losing more weight would bring me to that elusive self-love that I never reached. But I still am fearful of gaining more weight because now I think that, oh my God, it will be even worse. So I wonder how it was for you to look in the mirror and talk to yourself.
So I definitely, going back to high school, I definitely had negative body image then and comparing myself to others and not feeling like I fit in. So I think I had body image issues. I think what intuitive eating and especially reading Health at Every Size allowed me is it gave me tools on how to process it. And again, that just came later. So I think there was always discomfort. There was always
shame,
struggle, shame. Mm-hmm. And it probably just took me longer to figure out tools on how to actually work on it.
How did you work on it?
To be honest, it's one of those things that and I think this is true for anyone, is that it starts with understanding and accepting the moment. So for me, what was really key is saying, I don't need to love my body, but I just need to accept it. And I need to accept that this is the body that I have. And this is it. This is what these are the cards I've been dealt. But it really helped connect to saying, okay, my body might be this size, but it doesn't define me. It doesn't make me a bad father or a bad husband or a bad dietitian or a bad person. All this is the size. And what is more important is how all these other things that I just mentioned are how I'm doing with those things. Those are the true things that are important to me. And this body is just a shell, is just the outside. What's more important is the inside. So the days where I'm having a better body image day is that really resonates with me. The days where I'm struggling a little bit more, I'm feeling, maybe I'm, I've heard you talk about it on your podcast, is the self-doubt,
Yes.
I'm not good enough. I could have done this talk better. I could have, listen, I'm a dietitian and I am in a larger body, right? I will say the word fat and I don't mean it in a negative way, but I'm a fat dietitian. I am in a larger body than other dietitians out there. And there are nights I go to bed and I say, my practice would probably be busier if I wasn't in a larger body.
Yeah, I get what you mean.
I would probably be making more money right now if I was in a smaller body. Mm-hmm. And those thoughts come in. But then honestly, there are moments in my practice. I'm working with a client. I'm doing a podcast with Glennis. I'm having a conversation with you where all that bullshit goes away. All that stuff goes out of my consciousness. And I'll listen back to something I said, or I'll reflect on something I said. I was like, wow, that was smart. Where'd that come from?
Yeah.
I don't know, but wow.
So you think this is the right way to go? Because I still get the inner gremlin voice that tells me, you're really believing all this? You're just fooling yourself, and you're going to run right into a brick wall, and you're going to fail miserably and spectacularly, and the world will love to see you go down in flames. Like overly dramatic. And I still have the inside goal that I can only allow everything once this voice is gone. And I realized that no, probably this voice will never go away, because everybody I talk to says we still have the voice, we just deal with it differently. We are more aware of it coming in. We do not think that it's our voice. No, it's the society's integrated gremlin voice, and we can say no to that, and we can acknowledge it and distract ourselves and do stuff that is actually feeling good rather than dieting.
Yeah, no, this is exactly what I think all the time too, and I think the thing that really helped me with the body image part and what we're sort of talking about right now is reading Brene Brown's books. Mm-hmm. To me, that was really profound. And I read them as I was starting to think about starting a private practice and starting to go out on my own, because professionally, if I stayed at the VA, my life would have been basically
a lie.
It would have been a lie, but it would have been completely laid out before me. I could have stayed there my entire life. I would have retired at 62, had a great retirement, right, all set up. But the years getting to 62 would have been really tough for me, just professionally, right? I would not have felt very fulfilled professionally, but I could just power through it and then retire. Or the other option is completely unknown, take a leap off this amazing cliff and see what happens. And will I retire at 62? Who knows? It might be 72, but I don't care, because it's going to be more fulfilling to try than to not. And that's where Brene Brown really spoke to me. So it's, that whole quote that she talks about from Teddy Roosevelt about being in the arena.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, but that's the body image part, right? So when I'm having self-doubt.
Courage is not the absence of fear.
It's
right. It's the presence of fear in doing it anyway.
And to say, well, screw you about my body, right? And I'm going to have a private practice, and I'm going to be a fat dietitian, and I'm going to be okay with it. And you know what? I'm going to be true to myself. And that's the only thing I can really honor myself. And whatever happens business-wise will happen, but at least I'm true to myself.
That makes you such a badass. Do you realize that? Because everything else would mean you are a sheep, you're taking the easy way out, you want to apply to society's standards so that you have, you don't stand in the open that much, you're not in the arena that much, but you went right in and said, that's who Erin Flores is, and I'm going to do my thing. And that's why people love you. I believe that's what Brene Brown said. And I so resonate with you. When I studied with her, that was the first step towards me going, there might be a real me inside of me, and why don't I just go and search for that? And in the context of all this, the blog and the podcast started to develop. And so it feels like being in the arena, and that's like when I listen to your story, the first thing that comes to mind is like, you're a badass.
Well, thank you. That's incredibly uncomfortable to hear someone say, "Oh, dude, you're a badass." Because
why you wanted to go for some badassery today? I said yes.
I know. Listen. That's the doubt, right? That's the sort of like it's hard to like get that praise, but thank you. I mean, I really do appreciate that. And when I get perspective on it, if I were to have anyone else, right? If we had switched perspectives and you were telling me this whole story, I would say the exact same thing. I would say, Merritt, you are a badass for doing all this stuff. It's, again, that's just hard for, I think, each of us to sort of think about, is our own badassery. But I think once we accept it and we sort of say, yeah, I am a badass, we can affect more change in our community.
Yeah, and that's where community comes in. It needs me to tell you that you're a badass because
Right.
you might be doubting it today. And then it
Exactly.
takes you to tell Glennis that she's a badass because she might be doubting it today. You know, then it spreads and we need to lift each other and carry each other because it's not always easy to stick to the positive mindset because the fear voice creeps back in and that's normal. And so it's also normal to have other people tell you that you're a badass and that you're an awesome person because you might forget. We might forget. We've been running on the wrong program for 40 years plus. Maybe not, but yeah, mostly.
Yeah. No, you're right. We've been living off self-doubt as our main fuel for life. And that obviously does not help us very much.
That was the price for the blue pill.
Right. Exactly. Right. The blue pill is self-doubt. You can live with self-doubt for the rest of your life.
Yeah. How beautifully did I tie that back to
I love it.
Your Star Wars analogy. I wanted to know how you work with people. Like if I were your client, how would you work with me? And how do you work with men? Do they even open up about these things?
So my practice is, I tell people it's nutrition therapy. And again, this is a term I'm not the one to coin it, but I think I first heard it from Elise Resch, who is one of the co-authors of Intuitive Eating. Mm-hmm. I tell people this is nutrition therapy. I tell people I'm not giving you a meal plan. The only time I give a meal plan is if someone needs to weight restore, if they have an eating disorder, and I'll give them some structure because, medically that's indicated. But that's, only in those cases. And for everyone else, I don't give a meal plan. I say, we're going to talk about your relationship with food. And we're going to talk about your relationship between food and your body. And we're going to connect a lot of dots between how you feel about your body, how you feel about food, and how you interact with society as a whole around those two issues.
Would you want to know my whole life story if I were your client? Or would you really just want to know the relationship to food as it is right now?
Usually people... So my first question that I always ask people when they come in to my office is, why are you here? Like, what is your goal? And the common theme is, I know I'm done dieting. I've been dieting for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and I want to be done with dieting, but I don't know how to do that. So that's one theme.
And they're afraid, probably.
And they're afraid. And so they partially want a meal plan, but they also know that they don't want a meal plan. So for any new client, I just sort of roll it into my fee. I give them a copy of Intuitive Eating if they want it. And I give them the book and I say, listen, this is what we're going to work on. Like, this is how I work. And I would encourage you to read this book. And we're just going to sort of talk about it each week. And we're going to I want to hear what's resonating with you, what you're struggling with, and I'm going to be a partner in this with you. The analogy I always give people is that I don't really have a set roadmap, right? I don't know what each session is going to be. I don't know how many sessions it's going to take for you to feel comfortable and with this material, but I'm going to be alongside with you the whole process. So my job is to sort of say, oh, look, here's a turn at the road. We could go down this road or this road. What do you think about each of those? Like, what does that bring up for you when it comes to food? And it could be saying, I want to try making peace with Oreo cookies. Okay, great. So there are different ways we can do that. What feels comfortable to you and what would challenge you enough to help you change that relationship with Oreo cookies? So
what would you have them do? Just go and eat, stock up on Oreo cookies? I'd probably curse you already. I can't do this, Aaron.
So that's not the first thing I usually tell people to do.
Okay.
And I usually do that once there is a little bit of trust, both in me and Intuitive Eating. Because, like I said, some people are coming to me and they don't really know what Intuitive Eating is. And they know they want something different. But until they trust me, they're not going to do anything.
True.
So those first sessions are really about building some trust. So, that sort of making peace with the food might come a little bit later down the road when they know that this process can actually work. And when the time comes to do it, I say, there's a couple of different ways to do this. One is go to the market, give yourself permission to get anything you want in the market, whatever you want, or start with one thing. Give yourself permission to get one thing, and then yes, put that in the house and make it sort of available. And whenever you sort of feel like you would like whatever that food is, let's say it's an Oreo cookie, I want you to actually eat it and honor that craving. And when you do it, to do it with attunement. So that means listening to hunger, listening to fullness, but also listening to satisfaction and saying, when is enough? Is enough 2 cookies, 4 cookies, 1 cookie, 10 cookies? And I tell people, I don't know the answer to that. We need to find that out together.
You know what the problem would be for me? I think I couldn't stop because I love eating them. I love the texture of them. I love the feeling of just shoveling them in. And then I'd feel really happy having 30 of them. And then after that, I'd be like, oh, fuck, I shouldn't have. So that's what they say is probably going to happen in the beginning until you have neutralized the food. So how do you help them going through that part where binges like that can happen?
I really love, there's a part of intuitive eating where it talks about different voices that we have. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I really love is looking at things as an anthropologist and doing things without judgment or shame. And I love analogies, as you can tell. I tell people, imagine you're Jane Goodall and you're studying chimpanzees and you're out there in the bush, and Jane Goodall just watched these animals in their own environment and took notes. I want you to do the same thing with your eating. I just want you to not judge it, observe, and just observe without judgment. If an hour later you're saying, fuck, man, that was hard. I really didn't want 30 Oreo cookies.
Mm-hmm.
Is
now
just
I don't
note
trust
that.
anybody and anything anymore.
Right. So instead of going down that rabbit hole of doubt and shame, is to just observe and say, wow, I am feeling a lot of shame and guilt. I'm just going to maybe make a note of it, maybe in a journal or on my phone or whatever. And I'm going to just note it. And then when I go see Aaron again, we're going to talk about it.
And I'm not going to compensate for it. And I'm not going to throw the other Oreo cookies that I had stocked up on away.
You know what? I would even say if that is the next behavior, then that's the next behavior. And we're going to observe that too.
Oh, God. Good, yeah.
Like, I really tell people, like, there's no right or wrong. Like, if it's not you should, it's not you could have. It's what happened in the moment. What can I learn from it? And just that, this is very personal to me. And if I'm struggling and I have this behavior and I throw out all the cookies, well, that's a really powerful behavior. Why did I all of a sudden need to exert that control instead of honoring my body? And again, it all goes back to why I love Star Wars so much and all these references, because it's like the battle of the good side versus the dark side, right?
Yeah.
And, either you're Darth Vader and you threw away the cookies, or you're Luke and you're able to sort of be aware and be in the moment. And the reality is, it's like these voices need to sort of do battle, and you need to just sort of let them work themselves out.
I think Darth Vader would win because he would say, you're not honoring your body if you're eating 30 Oreos, so we have to throw them out. I'm protecting you. So he would probably be disguised as Luke. You know what I'm saying?
Right. No, absolutely. And that's where I tell people, like, you're going to rebel. Like, you've been holding back on Oreo cookies for 20 years.
Oh, yeah.
Of course you're going to rebel. I mean, and let's honor the rebellion. Let's just honor that this is the rebel.
Oh.
And let's honor that this is a natural process that needs to happen, because you've been restricting Oreo cookies for 20 years.
Yes.
And so, of course, you're going to rebel. So let's honor the rebel. Let's honor that part of the process and say, this is completely natural. I think the overall message we're talking about is that there's nothing wrong with my body.
Your practice is called balance, variety, and moderation. And as I probably mentioned, I'm not the best at moderation yet. So how did you find your own moderation sort of range?
Yeah, for me, it started with permission. It started with understanding that I'm allowed to eat this. So we mentioned chicken wings a little while ago. So finally I had to give myself permission to try chicken wings again, to sort of say, I'm allowed to eat this and there's nothing wrong with it. And I have the skills to listen to my body. So I'm going to trust my body and I'm just going to have the chicken wings. That helped with moderation because, sometimes I have all the wings and sometimes I don't have all the wings that are served to me. It's just, for me, moderation is about, I'm allowed to have this. I'm allowed to eat whatever I want, whether it's a kale salad or a hot fudge sundae. And there's no moral judgment about eating it. I'm just going to listen to my body. But I know if I were to eat only kale salads for a week, I'd feel pretty deprived of everything else. And if I ate only ice cream sundaes all week, I would feel pretty deprived of everything else. And so it's understanding that there's a balance, that there is, if I can listen, my body does regulate itself.
That you won't have the urge to eat fudge Sunday for the rest of your life. And it just needs that trust that we don't see when we're on this part of the tunnel and you're on the other part and you're just extending your hand to help someone walk into the tunnel and exit on the other side. What would you tell someone who is right now at a place where I am now? And how would you describe your life now as compared to before?
Definitely, it's a lot happier. Changing my relationship with food and changing my practice, I am infinitely happier. And that happiness bleeds into a lot of other areas. I think the challenge is being a badass in a culture that doesn't support being a badass.
Oh, exactly.
Right. I think that's the hard part that I push up against.
Do you find yourself less judgmental about other people's bodies nowadays?
That's a really good question. Definitely. I mean, body-wise, yes. I think I am constantly sort of checking my judgment and making sure that there isn't any, but also checking my privilege and making sure that, that I'm understanding my privilege within society. The hard part is in Southern California, diet culture, orthorexia, all these things are hugely rampant.
It's like the air that you breathe.
It is pretty much like the air we breathe. Absolutely. So that is, I'm not going to lie, that is the judgment that I struggle with now. Sort of looking at someone and saying, oh my God, they are so orthorexic. How are they doing? And I need to stop. And I sort of say, I don't know that person really. Why am I judging that person so much? So, that's something personally I'm continuing to work on because it doesn't help me. It really just doesn't help me.
Yeah, and we were the same at one point, so... Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
You wrote a wonderfully moving letter to your 8-year-old son back in November last year, I think. Would you like to share what you wanted your son to know so that other parents can soak up some inspiration?
Totally. So I think when I wrote that, I was really thinking about how do I raise my son so that he understands his role in the greater culture, but how, in essence, I was writing about privilege before I really understood it. And how can I teach my son how to respect all bodies? How can I teach my son to respect women, to understand patriarchy, to understand what it's like to be a man, but also to how a man can be a feminist and how a man can be a champion for body diversity, and sort of hoping that he can instill that I can instill some of these values in him. The Yiddish term is to be a mensch, right? To be a good person, to be someone that is empathetic to other person's struggles and what they're dealing with. And how do I pass that along to him without him feeling like his body doesn't fit in, or that it's not manly to be in touch with your feelings. And I think that was sort of the gist of what I was hoping he will learn. And his 9th birthday is coming up, so I think he's doing a pretty good job so far.
Wonderful. I think your wife must be the proudest wife in the whole LA area where you live. I mean, this is a wonderful transformation, isn't it?
It is. And, I tell people, I I could not have done any of this without my wife's support. When I told her I'm quitting work and I want to go back to school full time, she was like, okay, go for it. Go do it. There was no hesitancy. She knew how important it was for me and how much happier I would probably be with my career. When I really started to move into intuitive eating, she was right beside me. She has her own dieting history. And so, part of it, she was maybe like, seems a little bit crazy, but go for it. Do what you need to do. And as my body has changed from when we met, she's accepted it. She's never once said anything in a negative way or even suggestive in a negative way. I mean, she's been truly a partner with me throughout this whole thing. So, if she's thankful for me, I am doubly thankful for her because I couldn't have done any of this transformation without her.
It's amazing. I'm so grateful for all these talks. My heart is literally bursting. And say hi to your wife. I'm proud of her and what she does. And if she wants to join my group, Life Unrestricted, she totally should.
Absolutely.
I love to welcome her. And where do people find you if they would want to work with you?
So I have a website. It's bvmrd.com. So again, balance, variety, moderation, rd.com. I'm also on Facebook. If you search for me, Aaron Flores, RD, you'll find me. I'm on Twitter. My handle is @BVMRD. And I have a podcast with you interviewed Glennis. It was a great podcast. I just listened to it a couple days ago while I was hitting golf balls, and it was fantastic. and so, I host a podcast with Glennis called Dietitians Unplugged, and you can search for us on iTunes.
It's great, and I listen to it all the time. I'm equally grateful that you are actually hosting your podcast with Glennis because it's so carrying me through my everyday life. So it's really, really great to be in this community. I love this.
Yeah, no, it's I tell people it's one of the professionally, it's been one of the most exciting things to do and rewarding things because, we just like you, right? We're recording this and we don't really know what's going to happen when we put it out there. And when you see that, comments that people are enjoying it, or someone like yourself says, "Oh my God, that's such a great episode! I listened to it, and I love listening to it." It makes me so happy.
Yeah, I don't know. I think our podcasts are transporting the energy that we are putting into it, and I feel like my heart is opening up every time I have such a beautiful talk. And I think that's what people can take away from this, and that's the whole point. That's
right?
That's what makes it so gratifying for me as well. So, thank you. My last question is: what would you like to be remembered for?
I love that you ask this question to people. I think it's really. It's a really great question. And as I get older, maybe I start to think about legacy and what do I want to leave behind. And this question really forced me to sort of touch on that. And I think what I would really want to be remembered for is someone who, no matter what the cause, stood up for what I thought was right and didn't just go along with the masses, but someone who saw something wrong, some injustice, and stood up and made their voice heard that this is wrong and that we can do better, whether that's political, whether that's dieting, whether that's body image, whether that's being, in touch with our feelings as a man. To just, I want people to remember that he stood up and made his voice heard.
I think it's great what you're doing. It was amazing talking to you, and you're a perfect role model for all the males out there. So in case you ever forget, I will remind you how badass you are.
Thank you. And I'll listen to this. I'll have it on preset. So as soon as I need it, I'll just listen to this interview.
Yes. Anyway, I thank you so much for your time. It's been an amazing talk. And I wish you a great day.
This was today's dose of badassery from Life Unrestricted. Find the show notes with links to everything we mentioned in this episode over at lifeunrestricted.org. And if this show is making you feel good, awesome. Make sure to subscribe and please let others feel good too. By leaving a 5-star review on iTunes, you'll help make this show more visible and therefore more accessible for others. You're the best. Thanks.